You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo, bringing you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. Today on this week's Long Island News, we'd like to welcome the District Attorney from Nassau County, Madeline Singas. Hello, and nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you
for we know you're busy. We know your office is probably busier now than it's ever been.
It is.
Yeah. But we just want to, let me just preface this with DA Madeline Singas manages, and you can correct me if I'm off here, but a 430-person staff prosecuting and investigating around 30,000 criminal cases annually to ensure that Nassau remains one of the nation's safest suburban counties for its size. And again, we want to thank you for carving out a couple of minutes here that you could sit and talk with us about this stuff. And just to quickly remind everybody that the function of the Nassau County District Attorney's Office is to investigate and prosecute violations of state and local criminal statutes occurring within Nassau County. Now, I'm a neophyte when it comes to the working of the District Attorney's Office, but I have a little knowledge, which I guess could be dangerous. I'm curious. There's, from what I understand, there's two systems that a District Attorney's Office can run by, and they're called vertical or horizontal, the way the cases are handled. And I was just curious which way, just for the listening audience, the vertical, from what I understand, is an assistant district attorney would get the case and basically be with that case until it's done. All the way out to, right. And then the horizontal version would be that the assistant district attorney would get the case and then he would fulfill his part of it, and then he would send it on to the next group that would then carry it on to the end.
Exactly. Well, we work with a combination of both, but mostly vertical. And just so for your listeners to know, the office is broken up into different divisions in different bureaus. So some bureaus work more vertically than other bureaus. So, for example, we have a major case division. So that encompasses the major cases in the office, which include the homicides, all our special victims cases, special operations, which is gangs and high-level drug trafficking. And those operations work vertically. If someone is raped, God forbid, or there's a homicide, ADAs from the office ride those cases, so they're usually out at crime scenes and then pick up the case and handle it from indictment through disposition or trial or whatever happens. There's another general litigation division in the office, and that takes care of our upfront, what we call our upfront work, which is our grand jury work, also county court, which is just your run-of-the-mill felony, and our district court bureaus, which are your misdemeanor cases. So depending on the type of case, some of those are horizontal, some of those are vertical. All cases are assessed in a bureau that we have that we call Early Case Assessment Bureau, and there we begin the process of accumulating all our files and getting police reports, and then those are shot out to the ADAs responsible for the case, and then given over to the defense attorney as well as we devise these packets of discovery material that's then sent all over the county to defense attorneys. We also have, a conviction integrity division, which houses our appeals bureau. We have a community affairs division, which is the liaison and, my face to the community and sponsors all of our educational efforts, which are enormous, and they're constantly expanding. So, before COVID, we had assistant DAs out anywhere that you can imagine. We have an elder abuse unit, so we have our elder abuse prosecutor out and educating our seniors in senior homes or hospitals or houses of worship to talk to them about the latest scams or how to protect themselves, offering them services. We have prosecutors in schools talking to kids about a myriad of topics, from dating violence to drunk driving, to heroin abuse. Those now, with schools with COVID, we've turned that into an online platform so that kids can still see the programs, but it's challenging because we like to get into the schools, we like to talk to the kids, we like the kids to see us, and for most of them, they've never met a prosecutor, they've never met people in law enforcement, and those are really impactful sessions, and the kids come up to us afterwards, and the teachers tell us that they're talking about it for days to come. And I'll go out to schools and give out books, and then I'll get notes from our fourth graders and fifth graders and telling me about the books that they read. And for me, it's vitally important to be in the community and engaging, and that's been challenging now.
Yeah. I'll bet.
Definitely. Like I said, in normal times. Go ahead.
Gee, here I thought you only prosecuted cases. I had no idea.
Right.
For the longest time, I really had no idea that the district attorney's office was in that, mode of the teaching thing. I think that's great, but I think more people ought to know about it.
And because it's how you view a prosecutor's office, and for us, a big part of what we do is crime prevention. Let's make sure people don't even come into our doors, Exactly. So we deal with the cases that come in. Those were reacted to police arrests that come in. There's an aspect of the office, which I didn't talk about, that's our investigations division. They do a lot of financial crimes, a lot of public corruption cases. Those aren't made through arrests that PD makes, and then we pick up the prosecution. We begin those investigations and we do them until the end. So things like any public corruption type cases are usually cases that have begun in my office, usually through people walking in and making a complaint about something going on, and then we begin an investigation. That Special Operations Bureau that I talked about that does our high-level drug trafficking and gangs, MS-13 in Nassau County is something that we targeted. Those are long-term investigations that ran out of my office in connection with the Long Island Gang Task Force, sometimes the DEA, other federal agencies, but those, and of course NCPD, but they start from our office, and those take a lot of resources. But then there's a whole part where we're proactive, and that's the crime prevention part of the office. So how do we get out to our communities? How do we make sure we give people services that they need before they enter our doors, so that we redirect people and get them out of the system? Our goal, frankly, is if I could have nobody walking in these doors as a defendant, that would be great. We want that. So how do we build that? How do we work towards that? How do we engage our young adults? How do we show them that there are better ways to deal with the issues that they're confronting? How do we give them the help that they need? And a lot of that began with our young offenders, where for the first time we were sort of asking, when we had 16 and 17-year-olds, we don't now because of the raise the age, if you've heard that term. Yeah. So now 18 years old. Some crimes are still, the more heinous crimes we still have jurisdiction over. But when we had jurisdiction of the 16 and 17-year-olds, we spent enormous resources working with them to figure out, what's going on? Like, why is it that, for example, a case would come in, it's a petty larceny, an A misdemeanor, and someone stole something from Target, where before we would just look at the type of crime it is, someone's criminal record, and then make a plea offer and the case would move on. But now we started looking at, okay, let's talk to this kid and figure out why is it that he or she is stealing from Target, right? So if it's because they're feeding a drug habit, well, then that's something we can intervene and help and get them services. If it's just because she walked in with a bunch of her friends and someone said, let's see who can lift, this from Target, more likely than not, the experience of being arrested and the humiliation of what happened will be enough to self-correct that person and move on. So we ended up dismissing 90% of those cases and redirecting kids to services when we thought it was important, and those people did not recidivate again. So for us, that was a grand experiment, and that's how we approach a lot of these cases. If we can target the reason for the criminality, then maybe we can stop it. and reverse its course and give people the help that they need to get out of the system.
Yeah, that's great. That makes perfect sense. Definitely to that point of obviously trying to deal with the situation before it even arises. Let's speak a little bit, though, after it has occurred, the nature of the importance of the Office of Victim Services, and you had mentioned already the advisory councils and all that work they do in the community to prevent it, but the follow-up to help prevent recidivism and to support victims of various crimes, all types of measures, and I'm sure community-based organizations that your office partners with. Talk a little bit again about the challenges of having to do that follow-up work in the COVID kind of era.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and it has been challenging. So I established a victim office of core services, and that's geared towards our victims and helping to make sure that they get the services they need once they've been victimized by a crime. And that's intense. I spent a long time in my career as a special victims prosecutor, and I saw what those cases did to victims, and I had it for a small window. I had a case until the case disposed, but that person has been affected and continues to be affected for years. So how do we make sure, right, that we support a victim through a criminal process, because it's psychologically just devastating and emotionally really difficult. So we applied for a grant and received a grant so that we could hire more people, crime victim advocates, so that they can do the work, because the ADAs are so consumed by the case itself that they can't spend the hours sometimes it takes to walk a victim through all the different processes and get them the help that they need, whether it's medical assistance or help with their bills, or unfortunately in homicide cases, helping to pay for people's funerals. And, there's a lot there. And the only way we can do it is if we partner and engage with the community through our faith leaders, through social workers. We partner with FCA, Family Children's Association, on so many of our programs and projects, because they are the professionals. They're the social workers, they're the PhDs, the psychologists, psychiatrists, medical personnel that we need to support victims and also defendants through this process, through this interaction, the intersection. Most people never think about the work of a district attorney's office until, unfortunately, they've either been the victim of a crime or someone they know has been arrested, and suddenly come into this world that's been foreign to them, and it's overwhelming. So we try to educate, we try to support, we try to sustain, and that's challenging now with COVID. Just the general functioning of the DA's office was turned on its head. We shut our doors on March 17th, but we still had cases coming in, arrests were being made, and we had to figure out how to turn our operation into a completely virtual operation overnight. And really, my office of technological services, they were fantastic and working 24/7, and within days. We had every ADA, there's over 200 prosecutors assigned to the office. All of them were set up with their laptops, with secure connections to our case files in their homes. So it was as if their office in Mineola or in Hempstead was transported to their homes, and they were able to then participate in arraignments, through the court systems, virtual setups, and the defense attorneys, and harmonizing those systems with our own system while still getting information that we need from the police force, getting documents that we need, doing arraignments, making sure we were holding people accountable, and also moving the ball forward. And that has been a tremendous effort. And, I'm happy to say that we were able to do it seemingly flawlessly. It's really incredible, but it has changed, everything. Now we're slowly opening up again. Grand jurors are back in the building, so we have grand juries and panel. And, using all the things that everyone's aware of, wearing masks. So we've put them into the biggest courtrooms that we have so that they can spread out and maintain social distance. We use different doors to bring in witnesses, and that sort of logistic, administrative, level has just been really challenging, but has helped us think about how we could do things differently in the future when things go back to normal, if that's ever going to happen.
Hopefully soon, but
hopefully
definitely a lot of lessons learned, we're sure. Let's just remind our listeners also that they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, and they're listening to the Nassau County District Attorney, Madeline Singas, along with us. Go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Wow. And that when I quoted that number, 430 staff members, and it doesn't sound like anywhere near enough people to take care of all the things you just covered.
Right. I hope the county executives are listening. Yeah, we
it's like, do they sleep?
Yeah. Bring it up to her next time we talk to her again.
Right. And that includes our support staff, which is phenomenal, and also our detective investigators, which help support our cases. So, we're the biggest law firm in Nassau County. It's an incredible operation. Right. And, there's a lot of different types of crimes. So a special victims prosecutor can't handle a white collar, case because they're just trained differently. A vehicular prosecutor is not the ideal person to sustain and support our convictions in the appeals bureau. Everyone has specialized training and developed expertise in an area so that when people call us and they have an issue, we can direct them to so many subject matter experts in our office, and they'll find relief.
So if one group is getting an unusual amount of cases coming in, they can't just be spread out across all the groups. They kind of...
Yeah, well, it depends what kinds of cases they are, So, again, sometimes we move our resources where we need them. In fact, when I created the Special Operations Bureau, which is our gang and drug bureau, that was, I envisioned it sort of like a special operations in the military. Like wherever we need the help, we will just fill that with resources, highly trained investigators and litigators. They're a hybrid bureau, so they do both litigation and investigation. So when MS-13 came up and we knew that we had a big problem in Nassau County where huge percentages of our homicides were MS-13 homicides, we were able to move all of our resources there and made a huge dent in MS-13 operations in Nassau County. It was only because they were able to quickly, train our sites right on that problem and just inundate it with resources and help and arrests and information, intel, long-term investigations, really incredible work that they've been doing over the last couple of years. And, that's what a DA's office does, right? Wherever there is a need, we have to cover that need. And, it always amazes me that criminals will sort of find what the next crime is, and sometimes we can't anticipate it. So through COVID, suddenly we saw an explosion in people stealing unemployment checks, right? When all those unemployment checks were going out to help people in a crisis because they couldn't work, they were getting scammed out of their unemployment checks. When people were looking for masks or toilet paper, there were criminals, seemingly selling this stuff and just scamming people. And we had to then gear up and deal with that issue. So we respond to the kinds of crimes that arise depending on whatever's going on in society, while at the same time trying to remain proactive and handle our cases that way as well.
Quickly,
one of the things we say on the show a lot is for the elder folks is that idea that the IRS or Social Security or those agencies are not going to call you on the phone and ask you information like your Social Security number and your address, and because so many seniors they get scared, and we get it, but we keep repeating that, but I think I'd like to hear it from you.
Well, and to that point, DA Singas, we wanted to ask, is the COVID scam hotline that your office was involved with still active? Is that something that's...
Yes.
Okay. So we can give out
our complaint room. We can give you those numbers. If
I have it in front of me right here. It's 516-571-3505. Again, 516-571-3505. And you can also email reports to info@nassauda.org for anyone who has seen something that is a bit questionable and, they're concerned about, what the, again, kind of purpose of that was. So yeah, Bill, like you said, I know we've talked about it a lot. There's been a long list of consumer scams from robocalls, and I know there's been some prosecutions in the county about that, and just all these types of things that we saw before COVID, but now just kind of, like you said, get adapted.
Right, people are scared, and they think that, we were seeing scams where somebody would call up and say, oh, you just got your COVID test, and if you pay us this money, then we can share the results. Right? So people are so scared. Chances are that someone probably did just get a COVID test and now thinks it's a legitimate call. So they, give over money. And, the telltale sign, of course, what we tell people is no agency is asking for payment in the form of a gift card. So if anyone is asking you for a gift card, that is hang up the phone, right? Exactly. Like that, if it's, the grandparent scams where they call up and tell a senior that their granddaughter or son has been arrested and they need bail money, or has been in a terrible car accident and the hospital won't treat them unless you right away give us this money. And that creation of urgency, gets people very frightened, and then they act without thinking about it. And then once they do it, they're so embarrassed that they fell for it that they don't want to call the authorities, and they have to call us. Then I tell people the sooner they call us, the better, because those accounts are opened and shut before they can even make a police report, if you delay. So that kind of delay does not help us and minimizes the chance for us to get your money back. So if you think you've been scammed, you have to right away call someone, and then you can reflect on it later. But a lot of our seniors and others, get very embarrassed that they fell for these scams. But I can understand why, because that level of urgency and that fear that you think something has happened to someone that you care about, or to yourself, your own health, sort of creates that sense that, I better do this, otherwise someone's in trouble and I can't help them. So, I tell people, my seniors in my life, I have a lot of elders around me, and, we help program their phones so that everyone they know comes up when they're calling, right? So they recognize the name, and then I tell them, if you don't recognize a number, just don't pick it up, because you know what? Someone will leave you a message. If they're important, then they'll leave you a message. But if you do pick up and you're in the middle of this, just pause for a second and say, can I get a callback number? And I'll call you right back, and that interruption of that call, the person usually hangs up because they know that you're on to them, but it also gives a person some time. Even if you think it's legitimate, just say, you know what, can I just give me your number and I'll call you right back.
Exactly.
Then you can call your family member who supposedly is sick or in an accident. It gives a moment to reflect. So I tell people, just slow down, slow it down to give you an opportunity to really think about what's going on. The more urgency they create, the more you have to slow it down.
Very good advice.
Because it is so sad to me, and it infuriates me when people take advantage of our seniors in that way.
Of course, and I know another issue that your office has worked a lot about is elder abuse, and we can speak a little bit about that and maybe the opioid crisis quickly in the time we still have with you left. But let's just remind our listeners that, again, they are listening to this week's Long Island News. We're here with DA of Nassau County, Madeline Singas, and you're listening on 90.3 WHPC. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was going to just say that point, with COVID, one of the things that we've seen is that our senior and elder abuse, our felony cases have gone up something like 24%. We're also worried about domestic violence cases that I think will continue to climb, because people are now in their homes. They were, sheltered in, oftentimes with an abuser, and COVID has created this sort of perfect storm People are stressed out. They're losing their jobs, so they're financially stressed out. And anything that existed before, any tension in that house, any sort of power dynamics in that house has now been exacerbated by everyone being at home, not working, and that has created a situation where our vulnerable have become much more vulnerable, and people don't have eyes on them in the same way they did before. So, example, a senior would go out every week and go to the doctor, and a nurse would look at her, a doctor, that she would go to a house of worship, and somebody had eyes on her there, or she would go play, cards at the local community center, and people had eyes on our seniors in a way that now no one has eyes on them because they're not going to their doctor's appointments. Most people don't want to visit with them because they're afraid they would get them sick. So people are staying away from them as opposed to sort of
social isolation.
Socialite. And the same thing's going on with our child abuse. I'm worried about our kids who, again, may be in a vulnerable position. Usually teachers, coaches, they have eyes on kids every single day. So when they see that something's off, maybe they'll see a bruise, maybe a kid's demeanor has suddenly changed, they can alert somebody. That has not happened again, through COVID. So we worry in law enforcement about those people in those situations without access to the support systems and the people watching them that we usually rely on in law enforcement to report crimes to us. So I'm nervous about that, and we're gearing up. And again, if anyone thinks that anyone is in crisis or in trouble, please reach out to the DA's office. Please reach out to law enforcement. Even if you're wrong, it's okay. We'll take a look. I tell people also call, a woman, a child that you think might be in a situation that, or a senior that you're worried about. And don't just text, because we know from domestic violence cases, lots of times abusers take phones and answer texts, so you'll think it's okay, but it's not. And most people, if you know well enough, on the phone you'll be able to tell there's something wrong by the tone of their voice, how they're talking to you, if they're guarded. Go by, stand in the doorway, just eyeball someone that you care about to make sure they look okay to you. With our seniors, just take a quick walk through the house if you can, make sure they have food, make sure they're well groomed. This is such a stressful time, and the normal stressors are just amplified, and that's what has us nervous.
Yeah, I think one of the additions to that idea, because we would normally worry about the people that we know, but there are also people on our block that we might not know. And if you see a change in their behavior, that they're not picking up their mail, maybe the newspaper is it makes me so sad when I read stories about someone who's been in their home and they passed away 2 weeks ago and nobody knew it.
That's so sad.
It is. It really is. And I have a neighbor right here, and it's a perfect example. His lawn started getting high. And he usually is out there manicuring everything, and he wasn't. So you feel, well, gee, I don't want to bother him, but
and to that point, a lot of people are living with people who may be substance abusers. And in this sort of crisis, that also gets exacerbated, right? So we're seeing our heroin ODs going up, and people, if they're self-medicating and using substances, then they might be stealing money from their seniors, taking their checks, taking money from them so that they can support a habit, so that they can, continue with that. And our biggest challenge on our senior cases, our elders, is usually the senior cares more about the person that is abusing them than even they care about themselves, right? We know the typical person is a child, a grandchild. They don't want to see them be in trouble. They don't want to call the police because they're afraid that person's going to end up in jail, and they're the ones who put them there. And they're so conflicted about what to do. So we have an elder abuse unit. We have a multidisciplinary team that works with over 20 agencies so that we tell them, look, jail is not the only option here. We can help get you services that you need, and we can help get the person who's abusing you the services that they need so that we can sort of end this cycle. But you need intervention here. And, of course, if it's, physical abuse, sexual abuse, people will be held accountable. They will be prosecuted. But our main objective always is to keep our victims safe. And however we do that, we'll do that with the cooperation of that victim, with an eye towards what they want to see happening. So those are difficult cases made more difficult by COVID.
Definitely.
Tell me something. I'm curious about, I know the discovery laws. John and I had a few shows on where certainly the police commissioner talked about discovery and how at one point in New York State it had changed, and I think they had 15 days to give the defense all the information they had.
Exactly.
Is it still 15 days, or has it changed?
It's changed to 25, so it hasn't been a significant change. But
right. Now, how has that impacted you being able to really ensure a witness's safety, for starters?
Yeah, that's been the challenge, and that's been very difficult for us. And a lot of these computer platforms that we built, where we access reports from the police department, have helped during COVID, because we're still getting the information quickly via computers and platforms that we share and things that we built. So that's been helpful, but it's very expansive. So every single police report that's generated in a case to have to turn over in 25 days, regardless of how important it is to the case. So things like transporting defendants from one place to another, or in Nassau County, thank God it's a safe county, and when something happens that's big, there might be 16 police officers that show up to a crime scene, 8 cars that show up. We have to get the GPS coordinates of those cars. We have to get every single document generated, and it might be police officers who got to the scene 2 hours after the incident happened, and yet if we don't have that paperwork, then we can't announce ready. If we can't announce ready, we only have certain time limits built in where we can bring prosecutions. And those are the kinds of things that have been frustrating and have been really challenging. I mean, for the most part, it's been great, because we've been able to get core discovery and move it out quickly to defense attorneys, and it's good for defense attorneys, obviously, and the accused to get all the information to help them prepare for defense. But on some level, it has gotten so expansive, and the courts have basically not been able to deal with it yet. We're waiting to see some court opinions that can sort of explain for us and set up the limits better for us. But things like even on a drunk driving case, if we're getting solutions from another state that we need to run the machines, there's arguments that they're saying, no, we need all the paperwork from Philadelphia, who sends you the solutions on your drunk driving cases. And that has become,
onerous.
Sending over every single document that's ever associated with the case in the most expansive way is just unmanageable, and it's unworkable, and lots of DA's offices are struggling with that aspect of discovery. So, we're working on it.
That's so time-consuming. It's incredible.
Yeah. It is. It is.
You need three assistants for every lawyer that you have. And that wouldn't do it.
We hired what we call discovery expediters, and they help us gather information and do a lot of the legwork so that the ADAs are not consumed by only that, but can still deal with the meat of the issue, the case, and making sure we're keeping people safe. So again, that was challenging in and of itself in January when those changes happened, and then compounded by COVID. Has been really
my God.
Of course, and obviously all the new state criminal justice reform laws, and we'd love to have you back another time to talk a little bit more about your office's role, obviously, in that process, in every way. But also, just to finish, maybe if you wanted to speak again a little bit to, like you said before, what's being done to deal with the opioid crisis. We've obviously mentioned the underlying mental health crisis from a lot of the isolation and COVID kind of based change in our daily life. But I know, again, there's a center that that your office has in Freeport, and there's some other resources. If you just, I guess, close with some of those things that maybe people might need out there in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we found was that people were in crisis. They'd go to emergency rooms, and then they were released. They weren't kept at emergency rooms, and they were saying to them, well, call this place tomorrow and see if you can get a long-term placement into a program. And then they would call, and sometimes the programs had waiting lists that were, weeks, if not months long. So we funded the New Hope Center in Freeport so that they were existent, so that they can go 24/7. Because what we realize is, that most people are ODing usually overnight and late hours when most places aren't open, and they had nowhere to go after they were initially taken to an emergency room. So now you can go to New Hope. And at New Hope, you will begin medically assisted treatment. There are people there who will help you find the right program, long-term program for you to enter. They'll help with all the red tape of the insurance and filling out the forms and the things that are so foreign to everyone. Family members that I speak to every day that say, like, I can't navigate this without help. My daughter's in crisis, my son's in crisis, my partner's in crisis, and there's so much that I don't know where to begin, and that's where we sort of take that a little bit away from them and help them through that. And at New Hope, you can stay at New Hope for as long as it takes you to get into a longer-term treatment facility. So sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's 3 weeks. And we've helped since we funded New Hope. Over 2,000 people have gone through New Hope. And you can go, whether you're going through the hospital or you can just walk in off the street, and there are people there who can help you. So treatment for us was a huge part of how we were handling our heroin crisis, like making sure people can have access to treatment and treatment that works. Also education, right? So when we talk about going into schools, that's what we're talking about. We're talking to kids about what happens, like what does a life of addiction look like? How can you avoid that? We talk to parents about what are some of the signs that you should be looking for in your kids if you think that they're in trouble. We actually helped train some school nurses because kids were coming in and saying, I have I have a stomach ache, but they were really in the throes of either of addiction or withdrawal, and so they were trained we help bring people in to train on substance abuse disorders in middle school and high school, right? Because sometimes it starts that early, and of course, prosecution of these major traffickers who are really pouring in just tons of this poison onto our streets, into our kids, and they will pay the price in Nassau County. They will be held accountable. We have had very successful drug trafficking and drug sales prosecutions, and that includes your gang member drug dealer or your drug dealer, as I like to say, in a white coat. If you're a pharmacist and selling scripts, exactly. You're not going to be immune from prosecution in our county. So it's a lot of work. We've got tremendous partners who are helping us deal with it. But, I guess the message is I want people to know they're not alone. We know how isolating and scary it is. And there is hope, and every day is a step forward. And there are people who are trained and who are willing and able and want to help you. So just reach out.
Perfect. That's great.
Thank you so much again.
I can't thank you enough for giving us the chunk of time. And also, as I usually ask, we just hope that you'll come back sometime.
Yeah,
a lot more to talk about always.
Because I'm sure there's so much more to talk about. I learned, I did some background work, but you taught me a lot about what the district attorney's office does. I had no idea. And I don't think our listeners do either. Yeah.
It's a great office. I'm very proud of the men and women who work on behalf of all of our residents.
Yeah, definitely. You've got quite a mountain there to climb. So
be well till next time.
Take care. Stay well.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.